A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Hope that everybody is doing well by the grace of Almighty Allah. Welcome to session on the course English 5103. In this session, we will talk about principles of teaching grammar. The objectives of this session are: understand the effective principles of teaching grammar, know and handle some tasks and techniques reflecting the principles, and by the end of the session, students will be able to design classroom tasks for teaching grammar. Principle 1. Integrate both inductive and deductive methods. So, what are inductive and deductive methods? Deductive method refers to a method which is rules driven, and it starts from the general and goes to the specific. Deductive method starts with the presentation of a rule and is followed by examples in which the rule is applied. So, at the beginning, you are given the principles, the rules, and then you are given the examples or chunks of texts or sentences which use that particular rule. Thus, deductive method involves the learners being given a general rule which is then applied to specific language examples and honed, polished through practice exercises. For example, the teacher gives the rule that in present perfect tense you have to use have, has as auxiliary, and you have to have the past participle form of the main verb following the auxiliary. And the students get the rule, and following this rule, the students are given some examples, some sentences using the rules having the particles or elements like have, has plus past participle form of any verb. So students start with a rule in general, and then they are given specific examples so that the students can polish, attain the competence of getting the rule, understanding it, and making themselves able to practice it in reality. On the other hand, inductive method is a rule discovery method, and it starts from a specific rule and it goes to general one. Inductive method starts with some examples from which a rule is inferred. So you see just the reverse process. Inductive method starts with examples. So the chunks of text are given first, or examples are given first, and then the students have to infer, guess the rule underlying those examples or common found in those examples. Inductive method involves the learners detecting or noticing patterns and working out a rule for themselves before they practice the language. So as they are given some sentences or examples, they have to rule out, or they have to notice or detect, identify the rules may be working in those examples, and then only they can practice the language. For example, if we want to use the same example as we had with deductive method, you just give them, say, a paragraph, an essay, or some sentences in which there are examples or there are uses of present perfect tenses, and then you ask the students to chalk out which rules or what are the common pattern they find in those examples or in those sentences. And then they understand that, okay, in each case there is a have or has plus the past participle form of the verb. So they chalk out, they notice the detect the rule themselves, and then they practice other examples. So the question is, as English teacher, which method we should use with our students, inductive or deductive or combined? The choice depends on a number of factors. The quality of the grammar point. We know that a grammar point may be very simple, may be very complex. If it is simple, you should give them either of these methods, or you should use one of them. If it is complex, you can go for another, or you can use both of them combined. The second factor is learners' styles and preferences. We know that all the learners have their own styles of learning and preferences. Some students learn by reading, by getting the abstract rules first, but there are some students who are called social learners who learn better by doing or learning by doing. So in that case, you should give them inductive option. Also, if your class size is large, say in your class you have 100 or 200 students, that can also, the number of students in your class can also determine the method to be used. For a large class, deductive one is better, but for long-term effect, inductive one is better. Because in inductions, students need greater mental efforts, and which is better in the long run. But in deductions, students need less time to understand a point. So you see, each of them has their own advantages. But if you want to ensure greater intakes come from input. Input refers to the amount of language the students are exposed to, and we know that the whole amount of input does not turn into intake. Intake means the amount of knowledge or language the students are able to use on their own in real situations later on. So greater the inputs, greater the intakes, no doubt, but induction ensures greater intakes, and which is a target of second language learning. So you see that based on your situations, the styles and preferences of the learners, level of the learners, complexity of the grammar point, you should choose whether you should go for inductive one or deductive one or a combined one. But in most cases, the experts say that a combined one is more useful. Second principle, use tasks that make clear the relationship between grammatical form and communicative function. The question is, should we teach grammar as an abstract system, using isolated examples or sentences, out of context? And if you practice any of them or all of them together, that will lead to ineffective teaching learning of grammar. Students will develop no insights into communicative context or communicative function of those forms or grammar points. As a result, the students will know the rule, but they will not be able to use them correctly in situations, in real situations. And we know that that's a problem with most of our students, that we know the rule, but we cannot use them, or the rule does not come to our mind when we need them. So the extremists say that, then avoid teaching grammar. Should we avoid teaching grammar? And totally depend on the communicative function of grammatical points as they are found in context, in situations, in examples. It may be true for the native speakers, but of course it is not suggestible for second language teaching or foreign language teaching. So we should not avoid teaching grammar, but we should modify our techniques and we should use both the grammatical forms. We should draw the attention of our students and to notice, make them notice the grammatical forms as well as the functions played by those forms in real communicative situations. So what should we do? We should present the form, grammatical points, and also explain and show how that form or those forms are used in communication. So you should not give them only the definition and you should not give them the reason only why some form is used in real situation, but also how and when and in which context those forms are used. You should give them exposure, you should give them examples, and you should make them practice about when and how and in which context those forms are used. Third principle, focus on the development of procedural rather than declarative knowledge. Declarative knowledge refers to knowing the rules, that you know the rules. For example, we know that in English, if the subject is in third person singular number, we have an S with the verb like he goes. So you know the rule. If you know the rule, if you can talk about the rule, it means you have declarative knowledge. And procedural knowledge, on the other hand, refers to the ability of using the rules in communication. So you know the rules that you have to have S in third person singular number form, in present continuous tense, present indefinite tense. But we would say that you have the procedural knowledge if you are able to use them in real situation, in communication. So students know the explanation of rules, why particular rule is used. So it is called declarative knowledge. But unfortunately, we know that we know the rule, but we cannot use them. That is, the students, having known the rules, having known the explanation of the rules, they violate the rule when they use those rules. It means that they do not have or they lack procedural knowledge of grammatical item. They cannot process it. Native speakers of a language have procedural knowledge, but they do not bother about declarative knowledge. For example, a person who has never gone to school still knows which sentences are correct and which sentences are not. But they cannot or he cannot or she cannot explain why that sentence or those sentences are not correct or which rules those sentences have violated. But still they can use language correctly. That is why if you are a native speaker of a language, you have procedural knowledge. But in case of second language learners or speakers, you have to develop declarative knowledge. You have to know that there is a rule for third person singular number and the verb should have yes or yes. At the same time, you should know how to use them, and you have to use that rule when you are using that particular form of grammar or point of grammar. So, second language speakers or foreign language speakers need both declarative knowledge and procedural knowledge. And if you practice experiential learning by doing, you can make sure that your students get both procedural knowledge and declarative knowledge. So you give them the rule, or they chalk out the rule following inductive method, or you give them the rule following deductive method, and then you make them learn by doing, and you can ensure that your students know the declarative knowledge as well as know how to use them in real situation or real contexts. So these are the three principles of teaching grammar. And here are some ways of classifying grammar teaching techniques. We have at least 3 dimensions proposed by 3 experts. Doughty and Williams talked about implicit and explicit dimensions of techniques or grammar teaching techniques. Penny Ure talked about accuracy and fluency techniques or dimension, and Noonan talks about reproductive and creative. In implicit learning, the students are made detect the rules themselves, almost like inductive, and in explicit techniques you are giving the rules explicitly, making them practice the rules, etc. And in accuracy fluency continuum, your focus is either on accuracy or fluency. If your focus is on accuracy, you have to make them use the rules correctly, but if your focus is on fluency, you can give them some chance or options to avoid accuracy for the first few hours or months, but of course your final target will be both accuracy and fluency. And based on your focus on accuracy or fluency, you can choose the techniques. Reproductive technique refers to the tasks or techniques in which the teachers give them the students rules and the student just drill, almost like audiolingual method, and they reproduce the rules and they learn it. And in creative one, the students have to work with the texts and they have to chalk out or identify on their own the rules underlying, that is, they create the rules themselves. And based on these dimensions, you can choose your technique. Here are some classroom techniques and tasks that you can use in your classroom. The first one is input enhancement. I have already given you the idea about input and intake. Input refers to the chunks or amount of language available to students or the students are exposed to. Inputs make students notice the grammar item that the teacher wants to introduce. Teachers draw students' attention to items that are meant to be noticed by some way, like flagging them in some way, such as through highlighting, underlining, or coloring. Such awareness raising techniques are at the accuracy end of Penny Ure's accuracy fluency continuum. And the teachers should provide ample examples of a grammar item, for example, relative pronoun in a text in the language the students experience or use. So what you should do, you should give the students a lot of input, say a text, they have to read a lot, and you should point at some particular grammar point by flagging, by underlining or highlighting or coloring, and the students, when they are reading the text, they become aware of those underlined or highlighted texts or options, the parts of the text, and they are now, through these, they can develop their understanding of the grammar point. Then consciousness raising techniques, in which the students notice a particular grammatical feature or principle. The learners are not required to use or practice the target item. The students are made to experience use of an item like future tense with shall or will. The third one is grammar dictation, which is also called dictogloss, as its proponent Wasn't proposed. In this technique, the students collaborate in small groups, use language, and reflect on the grammar and its function. Students also reflect on their own output. So they write something or they speak out something which is recorded, which can be recorded, and then the students are asked to reflect on their own output. Teacher provides dictation and the students reconstruct the original text. Then the teacher reads out a text, or the students are made to listen to some recorded text, and then students reconstruct the original text, rewrite the text. Okay, so that is all about principles of teaching grammar, as well as some techniques and tasks to be followed in classroom. You have an assignment indeed. On page 158, 165 and 168, you have some questions. And of course you know that we are using the book by David Noonan, Practical English Language Teaching. So the questions that you find on these pages, you have to think of the questions. You have to read just the preceding extracts, preceding pages, and you have to answer on your own the questions. And I will give you an assignment in the assignment section on Edmodo, where you have to write answers, or you have to answer the questions that you find on these pages. So thank you very much for watching, and hope that you have understood the discussion. And if you have any question, please write in the comment box on Edmodo or on YouTube, so that I can give you feedback. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.